They show up on set, the actors start rehearsing, you set up the cameras, you know what the scene's going to do. And then you start filming this scene, and then you realize, oh my God, it sucks, you know?
Folks, today is a very special day. Years ago, I was in the right place at the right time, visiting a friend in Texas, and as it would turn out, I got asked to tag along on a film production for a music video, also from a veteran, and I'm hauling gear, bringing the talent around, and I'm just watching kind of the chaos of a production ensue. But in the middle of that, there was a director who had total control of the set, the vision, and was driving forward very, very powerful themes in a very powerful song. They turned into an award-winning music video. And that man was Christopher Martini. Fast forward to today, and he's taking on some of the biggest political subjects in the world. And we're going to talk about art. We're going to talk about some of his work. And we're going to talk about the courage that it takes for standing alone in an environment where you're kind of moving most of the time against the grain. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the call, Mr. Martini. How you doing today?
Great to be speaking to you again, Brent. It's been a while since I've heard your voice, so glad to be here.
Yeah, I had a blast working on that set. I was still kind of in the middle of some of my treatment protocols. I was a little bit outside of myself. I wasn't my normal me. So I'm so grateful that even with that going on, we still were able to connect, have a good relationship, and continue into like a really good friendship. So thank you so much.
Yeah, the Dear Mom music video where I met you was the perfect example of how you want a film production to be, where every single person that worked on it just felt really close. We all knew we were working on something important. And, you know, when you finish a job, you should feel like your family's splitting up. It should be a sad thing. Like, that's a sign of a really good team. And this is what I love about doing veteran projects is that you always get like-minded people. And I tend to do post deployment stories. So, you know, it's always about really important emotional subjects and just brings really good people to the table. You were one of them. I'm like, it was so awesome to have you on that and have your help and become friends. And so I'm really thankful for that.
Absolutely. Likewise. And Shannon Book, just what a great guy to work with. His music's phenomenal. And like the heartbeat behind that song was just so powerful. And you did a magnificent job of capturing all of that.
Yeah, Shannon has got an amazingly powerful voice. Like, I mean, the fact that he's also a veteran, of course, blows me away. If I didn't know he was a veteran, I would just think he was an amazingly talented musician. He's got such power and emotion in his voice. I'm in the middle of a documentary right now that I can't talk about that I directed. I'm editing. I have another editor. We're working together, kind of trying to finish that. But I'm hoping to use, I put a few of Shannon's songs in there. He knows because he sent them to me, but his music is working really well for this film also. He's just got that voice that it pulls you right into sort of the emotion, the brotherhood. And yeah, I love his music.
That's really great. Yeah, he's a phenomenal guy, great musician. So when we worked together on that music video, there's the world of pure aesthetics. It was cool. We had the motorcycles, we had the band out in the road. And how does the discipline of making a music video where every second has to be visually perfect, every sound has to be aligned, how does that translate to a documentary where you're dealing with real life and some of these messy-ish scenarios?
Well, it's funny because some of my music videos I shoot kind of like documentary style. You know, like I put real people in there and you know, you want to create situations where you're not, you know, where they don't really feel like you're filming, you know, like you want real emotion, real people. I'm a big fan of John Cassavetes' films. You know, he's one of my favorite directors, but he would make narrative films that way, sort of in a documentary style approach. So it's very similar. But in a documentary, I think the difference is you spend so much time with the subject and the camera's rolling so long and so much that they eventually drop their guard and you end up filming things that you didn't expect just by being in their proximity for so long. You know, that's in an ideal situation. On a music video, it's kind of like an operation. You plan it out, you go in there, you execute, and you leave. Sometimes you're creating narrative scenes. So it's a little different. I love doing music videos. It's actually less stress because on a narrative film, you're under more of a time crunch. Like on a feature film, you know, you have 3 months or however. I shot Trooper, which we could talk about, in 14 days, which was insane. A 2 hour,
Wow.
93-minute movie. But like, you know, a music video might be 3 days, you know, but the difference is you're not shooting sync sound. That's a huge difference with a music video is you're not filming dialogue. So you can't get interrupted by sound issues and that kind of thing. So and mostly you're filming stuff that can sort of fit abstractly if you want on top of the music. So there's not a lot of pressure. You can overshoot, sure, but you know, most of the time you can juggle those pieces of film around to make it work with the performance. You're essentially shooting a performance and then if you wish, images to go on top of that. So there's a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of creativity involved and I really enjoy it. With the documentary, you're always thinking about, wow, I have hours and hours and hours of footage. It's really made in the editing room. So you're shooting more to create more options for you later. So the filming is actually not so bad. Narrative filmmaking is when it gets stressful because there's a lot of people getting paid. There's actors. You're probably doing it under a union scale project, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of money involved. If you don't stay on schedule, it can really get out of control. So, but I actually live for that stress, you know, so it's a good thing.
Nice. Yeah, you like the just having those deadlines, being under the gun, if you will, and like, hey, you've got to perform, you've got to be on, and that puts you right in your flow space in your zone.
There's a lot of like improv when it comes to filmmaking because anything could happen. You could lose an actor, lose a location, just a crew member could quit on you. Anything could happen that could kind of throw off the balance of everything. You have to think on the spot. Like when a scene's not working, this is like when most people who haven't directed before, they freeze up. They show up on set, the actors start rehearsing, you set up the cameras, you know what the scene's going to do. And then you start filming this scene and then you realize, oh my God, it sucks, you know, like, or something like that happens. That's when it's your job to find something amazing out of that. Even if you have to throw out the script and completely improvise on the spot, there's actually a lot of like adrenaline and there's a thrill involved. I'm also going to be teaching veterans filmmaking on my film school. I'm creating my own film course, ChristopherMartini.com, and it's going to involve a lot of teaching veterans how to tell their stories because there's similar parallels between sort of the mission and the adrenaline. And that's why I think veterans are so well suited to filmmaking.
That's awesome. That is really excited. I've been keeping my eye out for that. I'm really excited about that program that you've been putting together. I know you've poured a lot of work into it. And I also got to do an interview with Dakota Wortman, and he's super stoked on it as well.
Very talented guy. Yeah. He's
Yeah,
just like you are. I consider you part of my team, and he is also, you know, so he's a very
fantastic.
talented filmmaker.
Yeah, he's great. As you were talking about how you put in those documentary style type things with your music videos, which we definitely saw in Dear Mom. We had the Gold Star families that were there. They did interview pieces. Those things were kind of overlaid, like you said. And would you mind telling us a little bit about Trooper? How does that fall on that spectrum in terms of documentary style versus more narrative?
So Trooper was my first feature film. I wrote a film about a returning Iraq war veteran who has sort of physical issues going on from combat and also mental issues, psychological issues. His dad's a Vietnam vet. He's played by my brother Max Martini, is still deployed. It's really a father-son story about two veterans helping each other. It was my first script. It was inspired by, I had edited a documentary on Gulf War veterans, and that's when I really fell in love with the military and telling the veteran story. I couldn't believe that we were treating our veterans so badly when they came home. And so it became my mission to kind of stay on the subject and build sort of a body of work. So, anyways, that led to Trooper. I wrote the script, in 3 weeks, I think. And after editing that documentary was kind of my research for it. So I had so much material in my head and I just locked myself in my apartment. I didn't have kids, so I was able to, spend 3 weeks and do nothing but writing. And the product was Trooper, and it placed in a script competition in Italy, surprisingly enough, because it was a very American story. And I think it won a script award. And, I was like, wow, okay, so this must be pretty good. I was editing, I think, National Lampoon movies at the time, and they were late in paying me. So I had like 5 checks or something piling up. So what happened is like they paid me all at once. And I had like a huge chunk of money, and I was like, I'm going to make my first feature. I'm just going to do it now. And then I sent it to my brother and I was like, do you want to play this guy? And a lot of people weren't kind of seeing the film. Like, I wanted to do a really dark film. I wasn't really afraid of going there and getting really dark with it. And, so a lot of people were telling me, don't do that. It's not Hollywood enough. And so I ended up playing the part. I knew the lines, but I wouldn't recommend anyone do that. Acting and directing at the same time is not, it'll drive you crazy. It's very difficult. I was also producing and doing everything,
Wow.
but I did it, and it ended up being a good film because we had a screening at the Actors Studio in New York, which is very prestigious. I think like Pacino went there, Eli Wallach, and Eli Wallach's daughter was in the audience watching. And this is like a liberal audience, not your typical military audience. And they loved the movie. So I was like, wow, we really have something. So I went and I screened it in Florida for veterans. Now, this was my first screening. And I mean, honestly, this was the people that I really cared about. If they thought it sucked, then I would be destroyed, because this was about veterans and it was overwhelmingly positive. Same response. And so I was like, wow, okay, so the left really likes it. And then the conservative kind of military audience really likes it. So ended up a really good film. Sundance, we almost got into Sundance. We almost got into Tribeca. I was devastated because they said, we might take this film if you can clear the rights to the Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen songs, which we did. We got permission from Dylan and Springsteen, who had never given a song for free ever. So it was like unheard of. Like, they don't license their music for less than $1 million per song, Doesn't matter who you are. And they each gave us a song for free. So we went back to Sundance and Tribeca and we're like, hey, we got the music. Are we in? Then we weren't in, and so this was actually marks a major turning point in my political life because I almost felt like, okay, here's a movie that is not pro-war, it's not anti-war, it's pro-military, okay? You're saying you love it and it's almost getting in. So, okay, so why isn't it getting in? And I walked away from that, with that kind of realization that this movie is just slightly more patriotic than they wanted. And that taught me a lot about sort of where Hollywood is politically, and that it kind of led to where I am now. That was like that moment with Trooper, realizing that from the festivals, and then 9/11, of course, and then just so many more events. That was sort of my political journey of where I am now. It kind of started with Trooper. But back to your question about the documentary filmmaking. So we shot that like a documentary. Like the camera was almost never on a tripod. It was always kind of like fly on the wall, observing things. The performances, I tried to direct people so that they sounded like real people sound like in real life. So it's like, it's one of these films that you're watching a scripted film and it doesn't feel like a reality show. It feels cinematic and purposeful, but at the same time, it feels that kind of stream of consciousness, voyeur kind of observing life like a documentary. So it was good. That was my opus. That was my first film. I'm very proud of it. We just moved into a new house and I turned on the big TV and I was like, just for fun, I like to pull it up and see where it's playing. And it's pretty cool. I mean, it's streaming in a lot of places and that was my first film. I'm happy, and like, I don't even care about making money on that film anymore. I just like want veterans to see it. I know this is a long rambling answer, but Trooper was like my first film, so I have a lot to say on it. I went to the Special Forces reunion in Vegas to tell Green Berets about my film course that I'm doing. And I was
Yeah, so you
handing
posted about
out,
that.
because I really want to teach veterans how to tell their story. And I want them to do it. I want them to write the script. I want to teach them how to do it. And I was just handing out copies of Trooper for free, DVDs. If anyone still has a DVD player, I was just kind of handing them out. And I want them to see the film. It's just money doesn't even matter anymore. I just want them to experience it.
That's awesome. I'm so stoked on that, and I can relate to a much smaller degree some of the frustrations that you were seeing with trying to get this into some of those big film festivals. Is I've written a book and I'm in the revision process for it now, and as I'm just kind of working on it and getting it to where I take it over to an editor or whatever, I've been just trying to get some feedback on it, beta readers. My university has a university undergraduate publication where they feature art, fiction, nonfiction, and even just the process of getting a war type excerpt. There was some friction there. You know what I mean? It wasn't an open door. It wasn't a
Right.
hey, let's share these diverse stories. It was they're kind of pretending to work with you so that they don't seem like they're cold shouldering you, but it hasn't gone anywhere. So I can relate to a small degree to that big impact that those film festivals probably had on your journey.
There's a book called Easy Riders and Raging Bulls that tells sort of the history of cinema, sort of the downfall after Jaws in like 1974. And it's a great book, which it kind of explains not only movies, but sort of like where the arts are now. I think after the 60s, a lot of, the hippies that were anti-war went into education and became sort of like cultural gatekeepers. This is what I figured out with the Trooper rejection at Sundance and Tribeca. It really made me think deeply about this. And so there's people who sort of pull the strings in the universities and they literally teach, every year, however many people every year. So it's not just them, but they're sort of like pumping out replicas of themselves that think the same way. So you have this real kind of monopoly on the arts. But it wasn't like that in the 50s, early 60s, 40s, I mean, look at the films of like Frank Capra, like one of the greats in cinema who, he was making pro US military films. I mean, most people were like God-fearing, patriotic. It only happened after kind of Vietnam. And I think you're experiencing it there with your book. I experienced that same kind of sort of censorship with my movies. And so I think today we're in a really interesting time because it's really hard for me to get upset when PBS is defunded because or when the Kennedy Center changes hands or something like that, because I just know that there's like a monopoly on the arts and they're not giving the rest of the country a chance to express themselves. It's not what this country stands for. but there's really promising things coming out, like Angel Studios. I don't watch a lot of their films because sometimes I don't want to know what other people are doing, but I can see from the trailers that they're really well crafted, like, and they're getting bigger and bigger actors involved, and they get write-ups in Variety and Hollywood Reporter. So like people are taking them seriously. I think conservatives can really make a comeback in the arts and change the cultural landscape of the country if we are able to teach other conservatives how to make art the right way, to teach the craft. And, because Angel Studios does it perfectly, but you have a lot of conservative filmmakers that don't really have that artistic sensibility. So they're making content that can't even come close to competing with Hollywood. Once we can actually do it as good as the left, I guess, then we're going to be changing the cultural landscape of the country, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just kind of pull on that thread a little bit more. So, Trooper, we've kind of talked about it. It got that great love from Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan, who donated that music, allowed you to, license it without the extreme royalties. That kind of moved you along. So, you've got the Hollywood resume, you've got the connections, you've got the talent, you've got that X factor. What was the moment that you realized that you were willing to risk that resume and tell stories that 99% of your peers are afraid to touch?
Wow. Okay. Well, that's the winning question. Okay. So I was in Canada. I was working in Canada when 9/11 happened. And
Wow.
that's when, like, right when 9/11 happened, I packed up my stuff. I was making so much money in Vancouver. I was in Canada, 9/11 hit, and I wanted to be back in New York. I wanted to be back in the United States. And I sensed something weird going on in Canada, especially, And so I wanted, just with the whole mindset around 9/11, it just like it was odd. So I wanted to come home. I drove across the country. I got to see how beautiful the country was. I fell in love with America again. I camped sometimes by myself in like national parks, and I fell in love with this country again. I'll never forget, I drove across the Brooklyn Bridge, and this was after 9/11, in my Ford Bronco, and I was like, "I just drove across the country and I'm back." I remember what I wanted. I wanted to help change the country. I wanted there to be sort of like an American Renaissance. That never happened, but that was sort of 9/11 was the beginning of, like, my political awakening. Then sort of figuring out the veterans were a window into that. You guys were a window into that because by seeing how they treat you and their views on war and this and that, I was able to learn a lot about where I stood politically. And it reminded me a lot of my grandfather, who was a World War II veteran. So, Trooper, falling in love with the veterans and then being rejected by, these big top festivals that would have changed my life and my career. It taught me just sort of the apathy of the American public, just that people mostly aren't thankful for this freedom that we have. And there's some people that would roll their eyes at what I just said, but if you truly don't have freedom, then you know it when you have it. And I wasn't vocal, and I didn't even know who I was politically. And this is the Trump effect. I don't consider myself MAGA. I'm a Republican, but the only way I can describe it is like he's taking you through the forest and he picks up this dirty, rotten log and he just shows you all the worms and termites underneath. I think that's what he did. That's what he did for me. It was through him that I could see all the ugliness and the resentment towards hardworking Americans, veterans, people that live in rural America in the middle. These are the people that I love. And, but they're really not loved, by the people in the big cities. Animosity towards real Americans, in my opinion. And that's what sort of Trump did, and it's just like, hey, I'm not like these people. I love these people in the middle of the country. I love my veterans and my veterans. I mean, but I feel like I've earned the right to say that now because I feel part of you. I'll never be you guys, but I feel like part of the community now. He got the wheels turning, but it wasn't until like 2019 COVID, George Floyd riots, that kind of thing, just sitting in a living room watching cities burn and just all the nonsense. And I think that was the moment that people in this country just started vocalizing all the nonsense that they believed. And I couldn't believe I was hearing and seeing what I was seeing. And it just everything happens for a reason. I made a decision. I did a post on Facebook, and it was the first time I said, "I'm a conservative." There, I said it. It was just that simple. And what that did was it opened a Pandora's box. And this is how I know that I was meant to go down this road, because within weeks or months, I was with the most vocal, the most active, activists that were conservative. Like, I was interviewing Scott LeBedo. I mean, I just like one thing after the another. I'm like hanging out with like Sebastian Gorka. I'm like, just God put me in these circles almost immediately. And then I'm making this movie about Scott LeBedo, and then it's in 1,000 theaters across the country, and it's getting 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. Hollywood is actively trying to get rid of us from the movie theaters. I mean, like, we're selling out theaters, and then the next day it's gone. So like somebody made a call, said, get rid of it. And then I'm at Mar-a-Lago screening it. Trump's there. I'm like, and then I would never know that like 4 months later, I would be there screening it, another movie at Mar-a-Lago, the documentary on Trump, same thing, movie theaters, same kind of censorship things happening. And so it's crazy. But now I'm at a point now where I feel like, in this documentary I'm doing now, is even more political than the last two. I actually can't talk about that right now, but I'm at the point now actually where I want to kind of step out of politics. I feel like I've done it. I have no desire to go to Mar-a-Lago again and hang out with that crowd. I need to keep moving and evolving. And what I want to do is right now is my 5-year goal from here is to get back into just pure cinema and the kind of movies that I fell in love with, the pre-Jaws movies. That Jaws is a
Oh,
great movie, but that was sort of like the bridge. But the classic cinema that was not political. It was just good stories well told.
cool. That's fantastic. I dig all of that. Yeah, you got put right in those rooms, right with the people, and you took it and ran with it, and you did an incredible job. I saw both of those documentaries in the theater. Stoked that you put those together and that you pushed so hard to get that national exposure. So going from there, I guess, like a lot of people will pick up
And
camera.
I do have, sorry, I do have to say that, God put me in the right spot to meet the right people that made, a lot of these projects, push these projects over the edge. So like Global Ascension Studios, Joshua Macchiello was the man responsible getting the Relentless Patriot to into theaters and out into the public, because there were times where I didn't even know what I was going to do with this film. Like, I just started shooting it. I had folded my company in Manhattan during COVID, and my partner and I split all the camera gear. So I had cameras, and I was just sitting on my ass, and I started filming Scott LeBedo. 5 years later, I got a movie theater in theaters, but there were times where I didn't even know how I was going to get this thing seen. And Scott would turn to me and go, well, how are we going to get this distributed? And I didn't know. And then here comes Joshua Macchiello, this Italian guy with Global Ascension Studios, gets it into theaters, and then like hires me to do the Trump documentary right after that, which, by the way, from start to finish, feature length documentary, it took us 2 months from principal photography to finishing editing and into theaters in less than 2 months. I mean, it was crazy. But anyways, I owe a lot to Josh for those two films. So there were angels along the way for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's fantastic. So some people, they'll pick up a camera, they'll call themselves directors, but you studied this, you graduated NYU with your background, with your knowledge. Whenever you're filming a subject like President Trump, are you looking at him as a politician? Do you see him as a character in a story? And if you do, how do you separate that to get that feel and the look that you're trying to accomplish with your art?
So I didn't interview him, but we actually made a choice not to interview Trump for that film, but we interviewed his family, Hulk Hogan. It might have been Hulk Hogan's last film before he died, Frank Stallone. I've been around famous people. My stepfather won 2 Emmy Awards. My brother's a pretty well-known actor. I grew up with celebrities in the house and just going to dinner, and I've been around them. And honestly, there's some people that get into film just so they can hang out with these people and like kiss their ass. And I honestly could care less. I'll tell you something funny. I mean, look, I respect them. I think like I'm tickled they're in the movie and everything, and
Mhm.
it's great. But at the end of the day, my job is to tell a story and to move the people watching it. So everything is an ingredient in this soup to make it the most amazing soup that changes people's lives when they eat it. That's how I see it, and it doesn't matter who the ingredients are. Like, I did a music video for Sandy June where I hired this real shrimper, this guy who worked on a shrimping boat. His name's Wookie Duet. That's his name. Amazing. And he's kinda hunched over from shrimping and, just like a real guy, and I have just as much awe for him, for this guy who worked on a shrimp boat, as I did when I shook President Trump's hand. To me, no one is better or less than the other because that's it. So it's great to work with famous people, but it's not driving me. I think that's one annoying thing about filmmaking is that you have to have somebody who's like A-list or to sell your movie or B-list. It's like incredibly annoying reality. I just wish that you could sell a movie just as easily with people you've never seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like quite a bit of a bottleneck. I had another friend of mine on the show that's working on getting into this same field. And that's what he was saying he was running into is getting his film to move forward was trying to find basically an A-lister or someone with that clout that can kind of carry it into the imaginations of all of us folks here at home consuming this content. So
But some of those people are got to where they are because of how amazing they are, And when you work with talent at that level, you have a wow moment because you really see how they got to that point. Because, I remember when I was working with Chris Maloney on the National Lampoon movies and I was editing him, and we were in my apartment in Brooklyn editing, and he's a big guy. We're in my little teeny little closet editing room. It's pretty funny, but he's a comedic genius, and I could just see like it was so refreshing to work with that kind of talent from an editing point of view because most actors who don't know what they're doing, you end up looking at piles of garbage in the editing room. And this guy was just, you could just tell solid chops, solid acting chops, and so much to work with. Like the actors like that give you so much to work with in the editing room. Like every take they do, they give you a different expression. So yeah, there are people that got to that level for a reason.
that's so great to hear. It is really neat to see and hear behind the scenes type stuff. I had a very, very brief interaction in the Hollywood sphere, and who knows, may end up kind of going back into the same type of work that I was doing before. But health events, life events, things like that, I kind of got away from it. I was doing mostly like set medic and safety, security consulting, things like that. And it was fun. I really enjoyed it. The big major project that I was on didn't end up going because of COVID. So it's kind of right around kind of that same
Yeah.
time frame.
Yeah.
And then I did some COVID safety officer type stuff after that, but then I just had to prioritize my health and things like that. But it's a fascinating world to me. And I think to
Yeah,
so many others,
COVID, I had a project during COVID that shut down, and we shut it down pretty much because the Screen Actors Guild, there was so much added cost because of COVID. It added 20% of our budget, and we were like, how can we we can't do this, so we just didn't do it.
wow. That's wild. So COVID kind of seems like it was a big turning point in your kind of like career progression because so much stuff kind of slowed down, shot down, and then you've moved into, all right, cool. I'm filming Scott Lebedo. I'm working on these projects. And then at any point of these things, did you have agents, friends, mentors, anything like that that were kind of like trying to stop you, guide you away from it? And if so, what was your moment where you're like, nope, I'm doing it anyway. I'm going full send. I'm doing Scott's documentary, President Trump's documentary.
Yeah, I mean, I lost a lot of friends in the film industry because of my politics, and that happened around COVID and after COVID, and it's still happening. I mean, because I feel like for some reason, the people in the film industry are the most politically vocal, it seems on social media. So I don't know why that is, but I would just hear just some vile stuff from people and I would just get rid of them. I don't want to know people who wish harm on police officers or military or anything like that, and or the good people of this country that are hardworking Americans that just want to live in safety, that so I lost a lot of people that way, but I still have some very good liberal friends that are in the film industry that I still work with. On some of my projects, they can't credit themselves, obviously, but there's some really good people that are like lifelong friends. And again, I'm chilling out now on politics. I'm not so interested in politics as much anymore. Like, I want to go back to just regular, pure cinema. But the problem is my dad was an artist from Rome, Italy. He was a sculptor, and he actually incorporated politics into his artwork. And he always said that I need to be political. If you're in the arts and you're dealing with subjects that are contemporary, that are like that people can really grab onto it. So you asked me, like, when I was filming the Relentless Patriot with Scott Lebedo, I was driving around filming him and he was in this truck, his truck that has like giant American flags on it and a skull on the front. I mean, it's just insane. And I'm like driving around, everyone's staring at us, but it was like, but it was such an awesome feeling because I'm right in the middle of history and my camera's rolling at that moment. You know what I mean? Like, it just, like,
For real.
that's what my dad was talking about because, like, I'm making a film about something that just happened in current events or politics, and, like, within months, it's on the screen. So, like, a lot of people are like, "How did you do that so fast?" So, like, when we did the Trump movie, the assassination happened while we were shooting, I believe. So we were able to incorporate that into the interviews. Like, if you see the Hulk Hogan interview in that film, we actually had some friction about using his footage because when we made that film, he revealed part of himself that he had never revealed, that emotional side of him. And it was just incredible because we were asking him things that were going on right then. So political filmmaking is, I do love it. I do love it for that reason, but it's very polarizing, and I want to get back to sort of the essence of why I fell in love with movies, which is just the human face, which is like two adults in conflict with each other, and the struggle in their face and just the human struggle. That's why I wanted to do it. I was 10 years old watching films by like Ingmar Bergman that are like deeply philosophical. I was like 10, 15 years old watching these films that we had around the house. And that's kind of what I fell in love with. So
That's
this
cool.
won't be the last. Look, this won't be the last political film I do, but I kind of want to do them in between the other stuff now.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's really great to be able to, like you said, be right there at the leading edge, tip of the spear as political events and world events, history is unfolding. But for you, it's as much, if not more, about the artistic side, about the expressive side, about bringing real, more traditional filmmaking and movie making type products and or art pieces and getting them in front of the masses. So I can totally see that, and I can also see where trying to toe that line in a very polarizing industry could be very energy draining.
What's going on in Hollywood right now, in the film industry, movies in general, is that I think because of movies like Jaws, people realized how much money they can make on a movie. And once you realize you can make that kind of money, it changes everything. There's been a move away from sort of adult driven drama, which is the stuff that most of us want to go to the movie theaters and see, as adults.
Mhm.
Like, you can only see Shrek, that kind of movie so much,
Right.
and then, like, you get tired of, like, the fast editing and the explosions and all this kind of stuff, and people just gave up. People don't think they're ever gonna be able to get a movie, the kind of movie they really wanna see, so they don't even go to the movie theaters anymore, and so there's no supply-demand thing, and then the theaters are going under, and then now you have, like, Warner Brothers are sort of the last, I guess now I have more respect for them because I understand what they really represent. They're sort of like the last stand in cinema, and
Hmm.
so they're the last stand in theatrical exhibition,
Hmm.
essentially.
Do you
And
mind,
and
describing that a little bit further or maybe a little different way? What is it that
yeah,
they're doing that's kind of being that last bastion?
well, because right now it's the tech companies that control the movies. Right now, it's like Netflix, Apple, Amazon. They have a monopoly over cinema right now, and Warner Brothers is the last old studio left
Mm,
standing,
wow.
essentially, and
Okay.
and so they're the ones that are really pushing that we're still pushing for theatrical. That's why you have a lot of the theater chains hoping that, Warner Brothers does not get bought by Netflix,
That's what I was gonna bring up too. I've been
and
seeing news articles about that, and it seems like it dovetails right
Netflix
into
is
this
about
conversation.
Netflix is about to take over Warner Brothers, which would be the seal of death for cinema, and
Wow.
the reason is because once they take over, they're gonna wanna do a simultaneous streaming release. They're only gonna wanna go to select theaters, and if they control the movie business, then that's the end of the theater, and that really sucks because we need that community experience. We need to go to the movie theater and be around people that we don't know, that make us uncomfortable. We can't just sit in our house and stream and not have contact with people. It's like
Constant isolation.
yeah, so I think what's gonna happen is there's gonna be more people, like, pushing against that. You know how, like, records when CDs came, the record stores, like, you still see these record stores that are kinda holding out, and, like, I think you're gonna see the same thing in film. You're gonna get, like, these purists like me that try to keep it going, and so, yeah, I mean, that's where I have to see myself now as sort of like part of that movement. Now, AI, that's the other thing because I use it a lot. I do these tutorials and AI is an incredible tool and like on a documentary to research and like I hate writing synopsis and stuff like that. So right now I'm hired to write a screenplay. I'm in the middle of adapting a book into a screenplay and AI is an incredible tool when you're writing. Instead of taking a week to read a book, AI will summarize, just give you the info. It would have taken you a week because you're not using it to do the actual writing, but you're using it as a tool so that
Mhm.
when you go to sit down to write, your head is full of that information and then boom, you could just go in and do it. So, but the AI is going to change stuff too, but you can't come close to real actors and real nuance and life. So it's not
Mm.
gonna change too much, I don't think.
Okay. That's good to know because I know that there was the huge strikes, SAG, a lot of actor strikes where they're like, "Nope, AI, they're trying to make us sign these contracts that allows them to take our likeness and reuse it and just all things are those are the things that I'm hearing on my end. I don't know if that's what you were
Well,
getting on your end.
actors should be very nervous. You can tell an AI actor, but still, the technology is gonna get better. Voiceover actors are done, I hate to say it, but I used an AI voiceover. It sounds like the real thing, photographers should be very worried, musicians, I can't see the director, I can't see my job being eliminating, but ultimately it could be. But unless you're doing a complete AI production, then the director is just sitting behind a desk, sort of envisioning this AI world. But there's going to be so many people who don't want to do it that way that you're going to need somebody to orchestrate the real life.
Makes sense. Yeah. That synthesizes it, that brings it, puts that human element into it and translates it or tells that story.
Into a
Makes
story.
sense.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind us circling back around, I know you're professionally moving away from the political side, but while I've got you here, I'd like to just ask a few more questions kind of in that realm. Maybe put a little book in there for you. So, you probably worked on other projects, but The Man You Didn't Know was the President Trump documentary that you said in less than 2 months, it was start to theaters and right before the election. So, during this time, like you mentioned,
Yeah,
you were
we got
focused.
75 million views on X right before the election,
Wow.
after Benny Johnson and Elon Musk shared it. It was quite incredible. I mean, anyways, sorry to
So
interrupt you.
wild. Yeah, especially whenever there's like 350, 330, 350-ish million, 350 million-ish in the States, 75 million is huge, huge portion of that. So huge kudos, massive success. And like you mentioned, you didn't necessarily work directly with interviewing Trump, but you had access to his family, his kids,
Mhm.
his advisors, the people that are in his inner circle, the people that are close to him, the people that he's helped. So, in these private moments, what is the single most surprising thing that you saw on or off camera that contradicts the monster that the media paints President Trump as?
Well, you can always tell a person by their family. And, Josh got access to the family, and, we had these interviews. And I got to tell you, like, I've interviewed a lot of people, and I've worked with actors and whatnot and other politicians. And the Trump family showed up on time. They did their job of what was asked of them for this documentary. They incredibly smart. They seemed very humble to me when we were filming. I think I remember thinking that I was expecting something way different. I'm used to sort of like I'd work on these movies in LA, and these sons of these famous actors would show up and just start treating everyone like garbage. And part of me was kind of like expecting something like that, and that's not what happened at all. So, look, I know Trump is like a three-dimensional person. I'm sure he hasn't done, everything right in his life. I think through him, our country is getting to a place where it needs to be, but I don't consider myself part of sort of the mega phenomenon or whatever that is. A lot of people like me, we just want a safer country, and I think he's a vehicle to get us there. And conservatives like to look backwards in order to move forward. Like we like to hold on to the things about this country that our parents valued. And I think we like progress, but we like to hold on to these very important things that this country was founded on. And so, I think he's also a vehicle to preserve some of that, because the world is moving like so fast.
Yeah.
I just like every day I think about sort of my grandfather. Like when I see elderly people, like I don't think, oh, get out of the way. Let me steamroll past because I got stuff to do. Like your time is done, like I'm just gonna walk over you. It's like
Mhm.
the elderly are like treasure troves of. So yeah, just to get back to some of the things that their core principles that have been lost. Like you said, you're a medic. I mean, I think that's like, I want you to teach me how to do that. Like, I want to know how to help somebody, like with my hands to save a life. Like, there's things that we're forgetting, like that people need to know how to do. They need to know how to communicate with one another. Progress is screwing this country up so badly. It's like technology, computers, this, that, but we're forgetting how to communicate. It's like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see how our kids are suffering because of it, because of this like sprint towards the future. Let's stop and look at where we were and what we've lost and how we can integrate some of the stuff that we're losing back into modern life, because
For
that's
sure.
going to make us happy. I think that's ultimately what it's all about, is like, we want to be safe and we want to be happy. And yeah, so the Trump kids, I felt like it didn't feel like an act. It didn't feel like they were putting on a fake. They felt like genuine people. They grew up with an incredibly rich father, but they didn't seem like spoiled rich kids. There's something very humbling about them. And again, probably not perfect people, but I have a good gut instinct about people, and they seemed like pretty good people to me.
That's great to hear. Down to earth. And yeah, of course, we've all got whatever. No one's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And we're all here working together, trying to hopefully make the world a better place, make the country a better place. And like you said, vehicle of change. He is a force that can help stabilize and secure our way of life moving forward, because there is a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of change. There is a lot of power plays that are going down just so that people can hold and maintain power, but are very toxic and very costly and deadly for normal, average, everyday people like myself. So, with that being said, it's so bizarre that there's so much on the line, but there's so many people, kind of like you're saying, there's so many things that are lost. So many people don't even see and understand that. They don't understand how much has to go right to get a special operations mission to be successful, you know? And kind of on that same realm of thought is how delicate safety and security in the big picture world stage really is. How close. Sometimes we're just like a spider web thread, or a hair's distance away from complete chaos, yet there is an adhesive, there is a glue that is still holding things together, but that it's not indestructible. It's actually very fragile. I've described it as bubbles in the past. Like, we have a bubble where we are able to have these free thoughts, we're able to have these free expressions. We can do these things without fear of being attacked immediately, being robbed, being extorted, being raped, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, for the most part, that's what we want to foster in the United States, is that freedom and that security. But it is like a bubble that can be lost with a pinprick, with whatever, and then all of a sudden, it's not that. It is chaos. I mean, we could point to so many incidences in current events recently, from the Ukrainian refugee that his neck was slit in
Yeah.
Charlotte. We don't need to go down the road, but like, it is like a bubble. It's very, very fragile. So, with that being said, 9/11, that's a big reason I'd already wanted to serve, but that really just like solidified it in my mind. And it was with that belief that, hey, we're going to keep this acts of violence like this off of our shores. We're going to create this bubble. We're going to push this bubble forward, and we're going to do what we can to try to, one, try to get rid of it. And two, at the very least, even if we can't get rid of it, protect the free world, if you will, as much as we can. So that's kind of like the heartbeat behind my draw to service. But what I realized coming back, and maybe part of like my disillusionment, I don't know, is I realized how much ground we had lost here in the 15 years that I was away fighting these battles, these different deployments and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and,
it was
and another thing we haven't mentioned is just sort of that God is not central part of our life in this country as it used to be, and I think that's what's really going on, a spiritual crisis. I was in a restaurant and this soldier came in. Well, he wasn't just a soldier, he was a lieutenant colonel, and well-known one too. I looked him up because I saw his name tag. Of course, I have a lot of respect for soldiers, and I always say something. I know you guys don't like to be thanked, but I thank you guys anyways. But constantly. But he prayed before he ate with his family. And I was like, I told my wife, I was like, my grandfather used to do that with us. My grandparents raised my brother and sister and I partly. We spent a lot of time with them, and they would pray before each meal. And I told my wife, I said, I want to start doing that, even if it's something really simple, to make God a part of your fabric, your daily life. I think if your religion is making you kill people, I think there's something wrong with that. I can't even fathom how someone who can call themselves a believer in anything and do something like that. We got to look at our behavior as a clue as to how spiritually evolved we are. And look, I have a long road to go in terms of that. But yeah, that's the other thing. I think making God part of our daily life can change a lot of the things that we're talking about in this call. It's also part of the movies I want to do. What am I trying to say with my movie? Although my present movie and the one before that was almost 90 minutes of swearing, but
Right.
that was
Yeah.
out of my control. I just chose certain subjects, but
Mhm.
I don't want to make a movie where I feel the need I have to do that unless it's part of the character or something. But a lot of these movies you see in Hollywood are made by people that you can tell just don't have any sort of spiritual life at all, because these movies, these scenes leave you with this empty, rotten feeling where you're scared and you think everyone's evil and the world's a bad place, and there's just so much. Those are the kind of people that are telling stories now, and you just know they're not the kind of person that would pray for and be thankful for their food at the dinner table. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
but filmmakers used to be that way, and look at the movies they made then when God was part of their fabric. I just had to bring up God just because that's what's missing. That's what's missing.
That's really good stuff. I'm glad you did. And like you said, it could be as simple as, hey, saying a prayer of thanks before you eat, accepting and respecting that you are provided with this meal that's going to nourish you, that's going to give you energy, that's going to keep you alive, that's going to help you do whatever it is that you do during the day. And for those that maybe,
When you sit down and you pray, it's a physiological thing. Your body changes, your chemistry changes. And I practice Buddhism. Look, for a long time, I would go on these retreats in the desert with these Zen monks. And then I kind of stopped doing that because I saw a little hypocrisy there with some of the people. And then I just went on a different path. Came back to the church. But I remember sitting there in the desert in Utah meditating. And when you do that, it's the same thing when you're in a pew with your rosary. You stop and you get outside of yourself and you bring that peace into your life and say, what can I do to make this a better place for everybody else? Then you go outside and you mess everything up and you don't do what you say you did and you
Mhm.
act like a jerk, but that's being human, right? But always try to get back to that every day so that you do that less and less, and you create those positive cells in your body and the people around you. I mean, that's what we need to be doing in movies and music and art, and whatever work you're doing. If you're a stonemason making a building, just each brick is like love. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like you know where I'm going with this.
yeah. In other ways, they talk about like your frequency that you're vibrating on or things like that. And like trauma, PTSD, depression, that brings you into like these lower, baser states where you're more of an animal than you are of an expressive human because our physiology kind of can trap us there. And it sounds like to me what you're saying is you are wanting to have more venues, more avenues, more things that people are exposed to every day that helps them spiral up into those
Mhm.
better vibrations, those better feelings, peace, hope,
Mm.
kindness, goodwill to others, all of these things. It sounds like the hope potentially is more people see this, more people experience it. It's an easier myelin. You know what I mean? Like our nervous system makes these pathways for what we do. And we train to be able to draw our gun real fast and shoot, But I feel like it also applies to like some of these deeper emotional states, like gratitude, right? If I'm always thinking pessimistic thoughts, that's the easy train to get on, right?
I think imperfection is a huge part of the development process, especially just saying to yourself, like, I'm not going to be perfect. I think I probably would have loved the military just because you make your bed perfectly. Everything is like executed perfectly. But just to tell yourself it's not perfect, but I'm going to get back to that perfection. Like I fell off that road and this got a little messy and like boom, I'm back. Just like in a good movie, it's like you're moving towards the light, but you're going to go through some dark shit to get there,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
conflict and like continuous conflict with yourself, with people, just like conflict's never going to stop. So like how do you move through that and just keep going forward and just getting right back? I don't know. That's the challenge of life that makes it worth living and so exciting. It's just how do you tackle that? Because the conflict, it seems like as I get older, gets heavier and heavier. I mean, I don't know if it's like God throwing more at me because he knows I can handle it, but that's the beauty of things. Just like in a good movie, that character is going to go through greater and greater conflict to get to that crisis moment is almost going to break him. But then he comes out on the other side and he brings back this like reward for the world. Every movie is like that, is that heroic journey. That's why I
Mhm.
love what you guys do because you do that for your job.
That's so cool. Yeah, I like the way that you framed all of that. Great director, you know what I mean? Very clear example of why you're so great director is because you framed that so well for us of just knowing, hey, yeah, things are messy, things are dirty. There's going to be darkness, there's going to be grit that we've got to get through, and some of like the gore or whatever, gore and horror. But on the other side of that, like you said, a gift. There's the reason for it all. So yeah, I thank you for framing it like that. It was fantastic. So, with kind of that being said, what are some of your visions moving forward for kind of like the work that you're hoping to do? From what we've kind of talked about, hey, you were wanting to tell the story about President Trump. You're wanting to tell the story about him, the man that people don't know. And was that about changing somebody's vote or maybe just shifting the way that people viewed President Trump as a human being?
Well,
What would you want somebody to walk
the
away from
Relentless
listening?
Patriot came out of my need to express what I was feeling politically, and then
Okay.
that led to the Trump documentary where I got hired to direct. It was sort of envisioned by Joshua Machello, producer who I work with now. We have a lot of stuff that we wanna do moving forward, and I was part of bringing his mission to life to show President Trump in a different light. I mean, we literally encountered hundreds of stories, so many that we couldn't even fit in the movie of good things that he's done. So it's
Mhm.
just, it offered something different in a time when everybody and their mother would try to find any kind of dirt on this guy to stop him because he threatened whatever existence they built their life on. And so it was also very controversial. Now, what do I want to do moving forward? Well, what am I doing right now? I'm finishing this documentary I can't talk about. That'll be my last highly political thing for a little while. But I got hired to adapt this book called The Stowaway in First Class about an Italian immigrant in the 20s. I don't want to give away too much. It was actually written by an Air Force veteran, Tony DeSantis. He's such an amazing guy, such a nice guy. So right now I have the dream job, which is a writing job, writing a script from a great book that was already written kind of cinematically and telling the immigrant story. It's awesome because I get to go back to the 20s and think about this guy who wanted to come to America. And it just makes you fall in love with the country again. Now, the way he got here, you're going to have to wait and see. But it's a great project. That's a movie that I'm going to want to direct. It's a period movie. I mean, it's going to be a huge budget, at least like $8 million probably, or five or something, however much we can do it for. But Oscars, great. But this movie that I'm writing, I've seen movies like this that won Oscars, and that I can tell already this is going to be better. And then there's a writer in Wyoming named Chilton Williamson, who has written a bunch of books and some westerns. One that was just released called The Last Westerner that I want to adapt into a movie. And then there's a Special Forces Green Beret Vietnam vet named Ray Morris, who was a real mentor, father figure, great friend, who passed away, who wrote another Western series of books called Gone to Texas, about the Texas Rangers, that I want to also adapt into either a movie or a series. There's a script that is part of my online film course that I've been writing that's sort of like a romantic comedy type thing, dark comedy. It's taken me forever to write. I'm still writing it. I'm ashamed to tell you how long I've been working on this, so I'm just going to avoid that topic. But that I will make. But it's been a challenging script to write. And then, there's some other stuff. There's a horror film that I wrote. I'm kind of conflicted on that one because it's very bloody, and this is where I have to decide what I said about what am I putting out in the world. So I have to think kind of morally, ethically, if that's something I want to make. But I did write a very violent horror movie. I'm not sure if I want to get that made or not. And then, there's other stuff. There's sort of this elderly nursing home story that a friend of mine wrote that I want to do. But for the most part, I want to focus on kind of $5 to $8 million, maybe $3 million. Oh, there's one more project. She's going to be mad that I didn't mention this. So Barb Allen, who was in Dear Mom, she played the mom. So I am directing her script called How to Woo a Widow, which is like a chick flick. Now, I'm really excited about this. So she wrote it. It's a great script. We've been kind of developing it. I'm putting the budget together for that. That's going to be like a $3 million movie that we'll raise money for, that we'll shoot in like upstate New York. But for the most part, these are all just straight up narrative films, not political in nature, just sort of adult driven dramas, good storytelling.
That's great. I'm excited to see all of them. You've got plenty of material to work with, lots of irons in the fire. I'm excited to see what you hammer out, especially
Mostly,
whenever.
my kids are what I want to work on, because we spoke about all this other nonsense, but really what it comes down to is them. We're up against so much as parents, and I want to raise them and try to instill, and not force upon them, but instill the kind of values that we're talking about here. And I have so many friends that are vets that can take us out and we can go do stuff like fishing and, camping and maybe hunting one day. My wife won't like that too much, but ATV stuff and just getting out there and getting dirty and cold. And that's what I really want to do, is show my kids all these great people that did experience all these great things, that know how to do these things that these computers, these iPads will never teach you how to really do unless you're doing it with your hands, and that's what my future really looks like when it all, aside from all the movies and everything, just showing them the important things.
That's awesome. It's so needed now. I think families are really the cornerstone of society, of fabric. Having a strong family unit that's capable, educated, is invaluable as we kind of move into this rapidly approaching future.
My kid just felt like this was a great turning point, because like he watches on his iPad and on the TV just like nonsense. What I was talking about, it's like children's content created by people that you would not want to have dinner with,
Yeah.
and just so much of this nonsense. Yesterday, I turned on Gilligan's Island for him and he fell in love with it. So he's been watching these episodes and I just love it. I feel so damn comfortable because I know that, look, I wish we were out fishing, but sometimes you got to pass the time. But I'm just glad that he's watching something that was made during a time in America where people still had their head on straight. It's funny. Like Gilligan's funny. These characters are all
Mhm.
great. So I love that he loves this old show. That's my new favorite thing.
That's great. Yeah, that's and being able to connect with them with things that were in your past, in your history, and being able to experience that with your kids has got to be super fulfilling. So you're the man in the arena. You are driving these projects forward. You are treading through some waters that I've never seen anyone really take. So it's been really cool to see your journey, see you take on these big projects. But for the young filmmaker or artist who's listening, maybe they're terrified to speak their mind because they want a career at Netflix or whatever. What would your advice be to them? Is it better for them to be safe and employed or dangerous and free?
You have to decide if you're going to be a filmmaker or a craftsperson. Basically, you have to decide if you're going to create your own destiny or if your destiny is going to be made by other people.
That's
That's
powerful.
you have to ultimately decide that. Okay? So, if you are going to be a filmmaker, then you have to do whatever you want. I mean, you have to create your own destiny. If that involves being highly political and pushing people's buttons, then you need to go. You don't have to do that on purpose just to get a rise out of people. But if that's your mission to tell political stories, then you got to go for it, and create your own destiny and just know that if you're meant to be doing that, you will be doing it and you'll always be able to put food on the table. Coming from a family of artists, that was the great thing. It drove me crazy because like everyone in my family is flaky. We're all like creative types, unreliable but when you come from a family of artists, you know that there's like you're meant to be doing this. Like God gave you a purpose, just like someone in the military or, law enforcement. Like they know the risks, they know the danger, but that's what they do, And it's the same thing in the arts. Like that you got to dive into the unknown and not know where your next meal is going to come from. And it's like every day I wake up and I'm like, what am I going to do? But then something always comes. So if you're doing political stuff and you're pissing people off, but you're making great work, I mean, if your work sucks, then you should be worried.
Right.
But like, if you're going to alienate people, make sure that you know what you're doing. Take my course, in filmmaking, but make sure it's good. But on the flip side of that, like I loved John Cassavetes. Like go on YouTube and look up John Cassavetes television rant and you'll see why I love this guy. I mean,
Television
he
rant.
he hated Hollywood and he was the godfather of independent cinema. If he didn't get into a film festival, he'd show up and show his film at the venue across the street from the festival just to piss them off. He would sell his films out of the back of his car, like you have to be that person who won't take no for an answer. And filmmaking is conflict. Like I'm in conflict with somebody on the film that I'm on right now, but that's what you signed up for. The thing is like, I think Ingmar Bergman, who's another one of my favorite filmmakers, said it. Like, if you want to make movies, you have to know it's not going to be easy. There's going to be major conflict involved. It's going to be hard. NYU film class dropped out. So, but you have to protect the story. So if you're
Mhm.
the director and there's people trying to undermine what you're doing, then you need to show some cojones and stand up for this story that you can't just be a pushover. So that's the other thing. So if you're going to go the filmmaker route, you have to be all in and just go for it. And this was not me. Like, this is why I'm not in LA, because the flip side is, are you going to be an employee or part of a system, a cog in the wheel or,
Okay.
a craftsperson or a crew member or whatever you want to call it, or even a director who's working in the studio system, he has to make everyone happy. If that's you, then do not get into politics, obviously. Play the game and play it well, and you'll probably make more money than I ever did. And, you'll probably go farther than I ever did. But I can sit back like today in my new house and I'm like looking at the TV going, holy crap, I've got like 8 movies on there that weren't easy to make by any means. And I poured all my life savings into these things. And like, that's pretty cool. Like, not many people, that were in theaters, and
Right.
I don't know, like, so that's me. Like, I needed to go and just say, I'm gonna get this done without anybody. Like, I hate waiting for people. You're a filmmaker if, like, you're not gonna wait for somebody to green light your movie. You're not gonna wait for funding. I didn't wait for funding on any of my movies. I just went out there and I started rolling the camera. If you have a
I
camera and
love
it's
it.
collecting dust, then you've got a problem if you call yourself a filmmaker, because that thing should be rolling. You should be out there shooting it yourself, editing it yourself. But if you're a crafts person, like my sister is a costume designer. Like, she does Super Bowl commercials and she has dressed Marlon Brando, like huge stars. And she's made more money than I'll ever see in my life, but because she can work the system. Like, she's good about not being political. In Hollywood, you can voice your opinions politically just as long as you're not a conservative like that. But so there's hypocrisy, but
Yeah.
if you play the game properly, then you
Yeah.
can go really far,
Mhm.
also. So that's another avenue.
Nice. You touch on the Hollywood hypocrisy. So I had something that I was considering doing, but since you said, I'm just going to go with it. Help me finish this sentence. The biggest lie Hollywood tells itself about freedom of speech is.
What's going on right now. I mean, that's why I made the Relentless Patriot. That's why I got pissed off, is because, and this is what Trump kind of brought to the light. So wait, you can be on a film set, working as a makeup artist or a grip or something, and you can stand around and talk about Trump in between shots for hours and hours and hours, and you can still keep your job. But I can't even tell you that I'm a Republican. Forget about saying this or that and all these vile things that people say when they're talking about Trump. Forget about all that. I know I can't say that, but if I say that I'm just a Republican, I'm done. Like, my career's over. There's something wrong with that. When you fought, Brent, so that we could say what we want whenever we want, have freedom of speech. If I say I'm a Christian, same thing, I'm done. That's not the United States, and there's something wrong with that. So I'm kind of at peace with it now, but it really made me sick for a while because it's so ass backwards, that there's so much allowed on the other side that's not allowed on our side. Here's what I haven't said. The point is that like in 2019, when I got political and everything, I kind of knew where things were going. Like, I could sense it. I got an email from Amazon and there's no white males in this advertisement. It's everything but, especially no straight white males. So like, they're kind of like rewriting things in a way where we're just not even in the picture anymore. So like, as a straight white male filmmaker, like, I guess in 2019 I could tell where things were going. Okay. And I would have never been let in that system regardless. You know what I'm saying? So I took this other road because I already knew that that road was going nowhere. And look, right now, the film industry is in, people are changing careers. Like, people in LA are not working. People are done. And I
Wow.
probably would have been done 4 or 5 years ago had I not taken this road. So follow your gut. I mean, that's the golden rule of filmmaking. Follow your gut and that will tell you exactly what you need to do. That will tell you how to make a good movie, and that will tell you how to make a good career.
I like that. Whenever in my life, if I kind of think about that, the times that I followed my gut, things worked out well. You know what I mean? Yeah, there was friction. Sometimes there was obstacles. I'm not saying it was just like a yellow brick road, but things worked well. Then the times that I pushed that away and I didn't follow my gut and I said, oh, well, I'll be more trusting or I'll open myself up to this, even though it just didn't feel right. Tragedy all the time. You know what I mean? Like the train went off the rails. Things went
It's
very poorly.
when you make a movie, it's like having a child and raising a child from infancy. Okay. And you see these protective parents that they're all chill and cool and laid back, but the moment their kid's livelihood is affected, then you see another side of them, right? Because it's their blood, it's their child, right? It's the same thing with filmmaking. When you've been doing this for 30 years like I am, they're like, "Oh, Chris Martini, he's such a easygoing, laid back filmmaker, director." Well, I am most of the time until you mess with my child.
Yeah.
When you mess with my child, you're gonna see another side of me. So if there's anyone on a film that's trying to get in the way of the story that you're trying to tell, because you'll encounter these people, right? Sometimes it's people who simply they don't know the business, or they don't have the cojones to make their own film, and so they try to monopolize off of the things that you've built over time and try to steer the ship in the wrong direction.
Mhm.
And that's when you're gonna see another side of me that violently will take, that ship and put it back on course. And then you're gonna go, "Chris Martini is a total prick." But the
You gotta steer the ship.
ship's back on course. So,
Yeah.
it's
That's
like there's
awesome.
gonna be conflict too,
That's awesome. Yep. So you've talked about, your kids and some of your accomplishments. Super awesome. Trophy case. You've won over 70 awards for your work throughout the years.
Not huge ones though. They're awards, yeah, but it's not like Sundance and all this kind of stuff. Filmmaking for me was like going upstairs. It was like, so when I started at the bottom, I was like, I couldn't get into film school. Like I kept applying and then I got in, and then like I'm on like one step up, right?
Mhm.
And then now I'm in film school, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing, right? I don't know how to tell a story. I'm like, I'm there. Okay. So I'm like, I'm on that next step. Now I'm like, okay, I can tell a story. I can't get into a film festival. Boom, film festival. Okay, now I'm into like tons of film festivals. I can't get any awards. Okay, now I'm getting like awards, but they're not like Sundance. They're not Tribeca, all that kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
And then, so that is still yet to be discovered, those top tier awards, an Oscar, a Cannes Film Festival, the Palme d'Or, whatever they call it, that thing. And
Mhm.
but then it was like, oh, I haven't gotten into movie theaters. My film hasn't been in theaters. I'm a filmmaker and I haven't shown in movie and then I did it, so it's like
Yeah.
one step at a time, but the awards thing, I still have to get the big awards. So
Mhm.
and at the end of the day, it's not quantity over quality. Now I'm like, I don't wanna make tons of films. I wanna make one great film and get one big award and make its money back to the investors and then some, and then I'll be good, and then I'll sleep easy.
Nice. Yeah. I feel like you've always been about impact, but it also kind of feels like this is where now you're like almost laser focused for like your next few projects. So
I
with
gotta
kind
go
of that,
big. I gotta go big now
so
with
would
the
you
budgets and
okay. So sounds to me like you've already kind of answered the question that I was going for. These awards, do they mean something different for you than the impact of The Man You Don't Know? Which one of those feels like a bigger victory to you? Being able to work on that project, direct it, get it into the theaters in such a short amount of time and have an impact on like world history, or some of the accolades that you've received for some of the other films. Like you said, Trooper was your first film, so it's a very special place in your heart. So I guess that's why I'm just kind of curious which one feels like the bigger victory for you as a person or as a filmmaker.
Each one was its own victory, you
Okay.
know? And there's not one victory that's greater than the other, because when I didn't know how to tell a story, and then you do, and you see the audience affected, you finally figure it out. That's a major victory. Seeing the name of your movie on 42nd Street in a movie theater next to like blockbusters is like, you have to really want to do it to wait 30 years before these things happen. You have to really love movies. It's because I love watching it, but it's not all of those things are together. And it's the whole journey of that staircase. And it's not one step on its own. It's that whole journey. And that's when you need to be thankful for where you are. I'm always like, I'm a workaholic and I always have to be multitasking and working on something and doing something and knocking something out. And I'm starting to chill out now where I can just look at what I've done and just pat myself on the back, just
Yeah.
chill out. It's like, okay, I'm probably not going to be an Ingmar Bergman. I mean, I don't know. That guy made like 3, 4 films a year. I don't know how he did it, but I kind of did it. So
Mhm.
just like chill out. Don't be so hard on yourself. If you want to make movies and you're just starting out, just do a little bit every day. Just write every day a little bit. If you got kids like I do, you got a million things going on, but you have this dream, you want to make movies, just baby steps, just a page a day. And then before long, you'll have a whole script, and then, you know what I mean? It's just go
Yeah.
easy on yourself, but don't stop. Like, don't not do something when you want to do it. Like, do a little bit every day. Just make sure you're consistent. Like, if you're tired, do it. Just do it tired. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it'll be done. And the next day you won't be tired and it'll be better. And then you'll go back and you'll make the bad stuff better. And it's a process. Like,
I
but
love it.
don't lag. That's my only advice to filmmakers. Just like a little bit at a day. But like, if you have energy and mental energy and you can go longer, like push yourself to go longer, but don't kill yourself. Just go easy on yourself.
That's good. That's good. I love it. And these principles are so awesome because I think that they need to be said, they need to be heard. And it kind of reiterates some of the stuff that I've read about the industry as well. So, Stephen Pressfield, he's an author that I value his work. I think he does good stuff. And I listened to a different book that he wrote that was more of his autobiography called Government Cheese. And it was hitting on a lot of these things that you're saying. It's like, hey, man, this is yeah, I'm in the movie theaters. Like, I've got my movies in the theaters next to the blockbusters, but there's 30 years of work here that you didn't see. 30 years of struggles, 30 years of
Yeah.
paying my dues, of learning, of developing the craft. And he's like, it wasn't until I was like, I can't remember how old he was when he said, I didn't get my breakthrough till he was like in his 50s or 60s. You know what I mean? But he was, like you said, consistent, showing up, being in the right rooms. And eventually, boom, now he's got, some of his works are now adopted for the big screen. So yeah,
Being a
it's
director is actually good because you can age into it well. I mean, it's like a lot of the great directors, like didn't do stuff until they were in their 50s. I mean, like Orson Welles made Citizen Kane, he was in his early 20s. I mean, that's insane, but like directing is like wine. It gets better with age a little bit because you need that life experience. One thing I didn't say that's super important is that I do think that if you want to direct, you should learn how to write and also act. I think it's super important. And then you have to be a writer, an actor, and you have to know what each crew member does. You have to learn and actually have experience doing what they do. And I think if you know how to wear all those hats, you'll be an awesome director because the actors will know that you're speaking their language. From writing, this is the most important thing. You'll know how to tell a good story. all of that is meaningless if you show up on set and your crew members, like your army, look at you like you're an a-hole because you don't know what you're talking about. They won't do anything. You have to know about lenses. You have to know what the costume supervisor is going through, how to put a C-stand together and lug a sandbag. I mean, don't be a prick director and not carry stuff. I mean, as long as it's not a union film, you can pick up some equipment and do some work too. So I don't know. There's a lot that you learn over the years, but the more you know about what other people do will make you a better filmmaker. Because like you see these directors that show up on set and they're like they're so bad to the people that work for them, and it's just the wrong approach. Back to what I'm saying, like, you should be a nice guy where it's like, this is your family, and you should feel upset when you have to say goodbye to them. But at the same time, if there's a bad apple and it's gonna ruin where this ship's going, then that's when you need to be the guy that they haven't seen. But they'll respect you for it. At the end of the day, they will, because they want a leader, you know? So when stuff goes wrong and they see that you're not just this like laid back, mellow guy or girl, and you know how to be mean and when you need to for the overall good, then you'll get respect that way.
That's good. Yeah, and I mean those are difficult lines to tread. So one of my frustrations I think in the teams was that the triad, like the master chief, the CO, they spent a lot more time at the team with the enablers, the technical support elements, and that was their day-to-day working operations for the most part. So keeping those relationships clean and not being the stern disciplinarian was kind of in their favor to keep things less conflict in their day-to-day life. Then most of the time the operators are out in the field training or out deployed. So we're grinding, we're doing work, we're trying to make sure everything's lined up for the next trip while we're on a trip. And then it's almost like we come back and we're it's pulling teeth to get the gear. It's pulling teeth to find the people in the office. It's pulling teeth to get the support that the system is there for. And so that leadership style that can be the disciplinarian dad, father figure, whatever, that can say, hey, sure, we need to be a family. We need to get along. We need to have our circuits, running well, but we got to do the job. If somebody's out of line, being able to, like you said, step up, be that leader is an incredible skill. And I think that's part of my life development. But I think everybody's kind of like working on in those spaces is trying to develop those traits that you can do it effectively. So I'm so glad that you brought that up because it relates to some of my experiences as well and just adjacent.
It all stems from failing. I mean, we haven't talked about that is failing. I guess that's the great thing about film school. It's not really a waste of money because it lets you fail, you know? So like when you spend your own money and you see that fly out the window and then you're left with this film that does not make any sense. You can only do that so many times before it breaks you. You know, this is why so many people drop out of filmmaking. So it's those failures that teach you. You know, after failing so many times when it's going right and when you have a good movie, right?
Nice.
And when it's going right, and then this other factor comes into play and it starts to change this thing and take it in another direction where it could become bad, that's when you know you gotta step in. So without failing, you're not gonna know when it's going bad because you're not gonna have that experience of, like, being in the editing room and looking at this garbage going, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
I did a lot of that. I looked at a lot of garbage that I had made, so and I'm still learning. I still
Awesome. So you've tackled the biggest political figure on earth. Where do you go from here? What's the story that Christopher Martini hasn't told yet?
I mean, I told you a few of them, but I'd like to do a movie that really captures my childhood and my family. I was really impacted, like, by movies, Ordinary People, Kramer versus Kramer, that were sort of like family dramas,
Mhm.
and, my family was a divorced family, and I don't think I've really tackled it properly, but I would really love to do a film about sort of the complexities that were involved in my family when I was growing up, and so, having an Italian father and an Irish Texan mother and sort of a divorce, and it was a unique American family, and I wanna find a way to capture that somehow and put that into a package, a story that kinda archetypal that any American will look at that and relate. We were such a different family that's gonna be a challenging job to make that kinda universal.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. Yeah, that sounds like great because people need to hear those stories. They need to, like I said, the family I feel like has been moved away from so much in like our modern world, and it has so much to do with how people are raised, how much they know about the world, how they treat other people, the respect that they show in an area of public where there's other people. So yeah, I think that would be a very powerful legacy piece that you
Yeah,
could leave behind.
God and the family are where we need to put our focus back. I think if we focus on those 2 things, a lot of this mental health stuff is gonna improve.
That's awesome. Great vision, and that's very aligned with I'm hoping to do here with the podcast is help address some of these issues, help the people that are in the darkness, that are struggling through things that maybe they came from abusive home, whatever it might be, but give them that lifeline, give them some hope and show them some stories like yourself, like, hey, we came from a broken home, but look at how successful we've been. Look at how much values we can still throw out there and put out on the table. So absolutely fantastic.
I'm not done with the military, the veteran thing either. After Trooper, I was like, "Oh, I don't wanna get pigeonholed," but then I kinda realized it was my calling. It's become I'm building sort of a body of work around veterans issues, military
Mhm.
issues, and stuff, and I would like to teach more civilians how to break into the military kinda circle so that we can show that we love you guys and that we are here if you need us. We gotta break that barrier because if we can get in there and earn and I can teach people how to earn trust, I think that's gonna help a lot of veterans also, just knowing that there's, a community of civilians that really is thankful and has their back and in a meaningful way, meaning like
Mhm.
make time, not be afraid to hear stories and listen and stop what you're doing and talk and say, "Hey, call me if you need to talk." Seriously, even if I don't hear from you, I want you to know that you can. Just little stuff like that. I've kind of, with my veteran films, like, exposed myself to the community in a way where I give everybody access. Like, I don't cut anyone off, especially veterans, and it takes up a lot of time. It takes me out of what I'm doing, but I love it. I just love to help in that way and for them to know that I'm not, like, so busy that I can't take a call or be concerned about what just today I called a veteran friend of mine, his parents are both dying, and he's taking care of them himself, and, it's just like he's a friend. I want him to know that I'm thinking about him. If we can get more civilians to do stuff like that, I think that we can help our military who's struggling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, I love your passion behind your work, the heartbeat behind it. I know that you truly care about others, about the veterans community in general. So, again, thank you so much for being on the show. I do want to give you the last word. Any last words of wisdom, advice that you want to share with the listeners? You've got the stage for whatever you want to pass on.
Well, Brent, I told you I thought I was gonna miss this interview, but I'm so glad I made it, and just talking to you, you are really good at this because I wasn't expecting to say this much. You definitely have the ability to bring it out of me. I don't know. I don't know really know what to leave the audience with other than we're living in some dangerous times right now, and it's kind of scary. And I don't know where things are going. I'm very concerned for my kids' future and growing up in this country. And I guess what I want to leave the audience with is if you're a veteran or a law enforcement or first responder, I feel like you've already sacrificed. But if you're not, what can civilians do to sacrifice for their country? What risk can you take that's going to take you out of your comfort zone, that's going to risk your livelihood to make this a better country for everybody else? Because I did to some extent in my career. Now I'm kind of like pulling back again, but I'll do it again. But it's like, and now I'm willing to kinda just stop and do whatever I need to do for my kids so it's a safer, better country for them, but it's like, part of the problem is like, it's too safe. We're living off of what you guys did for us, what each generation of our military did to make this a safe country where we don't have to risk and put everything on the line, but now things are changing, and we actually need to get uncomfortable and do things that we don't, I'm just speaking like peaceful things, but that
Mhm.
might, things that you do that might put your job at risk, that might put your friends, your livelihood at risk, but it's for our country, whether it's speaking out or communicating or running for council or passing bills or whatever, making art about it, or just do something for this country. That's it. That's all, in whatever form you can, because we're not going to have it. Things are changing so fast, and we're not going to have this if we all don't start thinking this way quickly.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. I definitely agree. Again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I look forward to seeing all of your new projects. I'm excited.
Brent, thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.